Welcome to Budapest Window, the podcast where we open a small window into the lives of internationals who now call Budapest their home. I'm your host, Kriszti Gatszev, a language coach and a curious listener. Today's guest has lived a life shaped by science, service, and the shifting landscape of Europe. He grew up in 1960s London, studied nuclear physics in Imperial College, worked across France and Germany, visited Chernobyl multiple times, and helped rebuild nuclear safety standards in the former Soviet region. He's also a rower, a linguist, a Royal Navy veteran, an opera lover, and a passionate student of World War II. David Wilkes, welcome to Budapest Window.
Thank you, Kriszti. Nice to be here.
Thank you, yes. Well, you grew up in London in the 1960s, a time many people describe as the place to be. What was your London like?
It was exciting. I was actually born in London, and my parents foolishly decided to move away when I was about 7 without consulting me. And we moved up to Chester, which is a very nice place. But I went back to university in 1967, so when I was 18. And that was the peak of the peak of swinging London. And all the pop music, all the pop music was English. Actually, an awful lot of it was Liverpool, which is near Chester as well, of course. But it was a really sort of vibrant scene in London at that time. Fashion as well, you know.
Fascinating.
And
Twiggy, of course.
Twiggy, yes, I don't think Twiggy particularly turned me on at the time, but there was an incredibly exciting shop, Bieber, nearby, and Imperial College is situated in South Kensington, SW7, which is a really lovely place. It was a lovely place to be. And also 1968, of course, everybody was rioting.
Oh, right, yes.
Except me. Czechoslovakia, they were rioting.
Yes.
For one reason. Anti-communist. In Paris, they were rioting because they wanted to be communists.
Yes.
And in London, we were rioting because we just didn't like, as far as I can see, we didn't like the establishment.
Right.
And there was no real coherence.
Right.
Oh, and in the United States, they were rioting because of Vietnam.
Right, yes. So did you actually go to any pop or rock concert those days?
Actually, I've only ever been to one rock concert, and that wasn't very long ago. It was Eros Ramazzotti in Budapest. So I didn't go to any rock concerts, but I did go in Imperial College there were these dances that they called hops in those days. And there was a group there, was it called Smile or something? Yeah, probably. It was actually the forerunner to Queen.
Right.
I didn't like it. The volume was too loud. It was bloody awful. I was just...
But you also like the opera. When did this last?
Actually, it's not really the opera. The opera, I do go to the opera here because we have a friend who's in the orchestra here. So I go to the opera quite a lot in Budapest, but hardly ever went at that time. What I used to go to when I was a university student, was a lot of Mahler and Bruckner stuff. Because I had a school friend who was an orchestra player who introduced me. He gave me a seminar over a couple of days. In fact, it was 2 or 3 of us, and explained the development of, classical romantic music. And then Mahler was his favorite. And I went straight out and bought Mahler's Second Symphony on a vinyl discs, And this guy was a medical student when I was an engineering student, and he was always fixing up concerts. So I used to go, that was my music at that time. Later it probably spread to opera, as I said, but,
Yeah, that's lovely. Yes.
Yeah.
Now, you said you weren't good enough for football, so you turned to rowing, and it became a fashion. What did rowing give you that stayed with you throughout your life?
Yeah. First of all, it wasn't that I wasn't good enough for football. I didn't want to do it. Because it was cold and it was muddy and it was wet. You know how it is in England in the wintertime. And those that weren't actually stars were not encouraged. But at the age of about 13, we had the option at school, because we were near a river, we had a rowing club. We had the option to join the rowing club. So I went and did it just because it was not such a nasty environment. And funnily enough, I found I was actually good at something for the first time in my life. So, actually, I noticed when I was about 14, suddenly I was in a crew that was representing the school. And that's a big thing in English schools today. Maybe it's not like that here, but we competed between schools a lot, and you were a kind of hero if you represented the school and won things, particularly, which we did. So I found I was quite good at that. And when you're good at something, even if it's whatever it is, it motivates you, of course. And what was the question? What did it do for me?
Yes.
Well, first of all, it gave me confidence. And as a spotty teenager in 63, suddenly I was confident. I was overconfident, perhaps arrogant. But we all were, because we were in a crew, 8 people, and there was an esprit de corps from this. And suddenly we were, from being nobodies, we were somebodies within the school. And I noticed, in fact, I think several of us noticed, that our academic performance increased. It was very strange.
Very interesting.
You wouldn't have thought that. And I became less fussy about food as well. I just needed so much food, the number of calories you need when you do these sort of sports.
Yes. Now, rowing is such a disciplined sport. Did that discipline shape your scientific career?
It shaped the university I went to, because I was only really interested in rowing, not in engineering or science. Although that's A-levels, the sort of baccalaureate and A-levels were in science subjects, because actually that was what I was best at. And I went to University of London, Imperial College, because that was one of the best rowing squads in the country. So in that sense, it shaped my scientific career, although that wasn't a scientific career at that age. Really, I went to university to row.
Amazing,
and, it's just it's just what happens.
Right. So do you still follow rowing today?
Yeah, I still do it even. Not competitively, of course. 77 years old, I wouldn't want to do anything too strenuous and suddenly die in the boat or something. No. But it does happen, So I still do it as a way of keeping fit. I probably go down to the river, row in a crew 2 or 3 times a week, and then do stuff in the gym. So I do something most days, which is perhaps a bit unusual.
Well, you look great.
Well, I sometimes feel great, but not always.
Right, of course. I have to ask, the purple Wellington boots you wore for...
Yes, purple, the colour of University of London Boat Club. Because Imperial College was one of the constituent colleges of the University of London. It was a huge university.
Yes.
It's not like that at the moment anymore, because Imperial College declared independence and is an independent university now. But at that time, the colour of University of London was purple. And there was a shop down the road called Bieber, which was a highly fashionable place. And so incredibly fashionable and cool, one would say, that there was, we could talk more about it, but you're sticking to the purple wellies. They cost, in 1974, they cost £1 a pair. They were made in Iran, and they were sort of a purple glitter.
Wow.
And they were incredibly cheap. But the reason we needed Wellington boots, because you can imagine if you were rowing on Lake Balaton, or actually Valenza, which is where a lot of rowing is done, and also on the Duna here, you would have a landing stage. But the Thames at London being tidal, there's a massive tidal variation, 5, 6, 7 meters, depending on which tides, and you have to paddle in the river to carry the boat in. You carry the boat in, and you paddle, and then to get in, and you want your feet dry, of course. So you take wellies and you stuff them in the bottom of the boat, or if you're one of these fortunate clubs that has a boatman, he collects them and then brings them down to you. But don't think it was like that with us. But yeah, that's the purple well is.
Wow, thank you. Yeah. You studied nuclear physics at Imperial College, one of the most demanding environments imaginable. But Imperial also has this unexpected cultural connection. It's where Brian May, the guitarist of Queen, studied astrophysics.
Yes. Actually, I didn't study nuclear physics because there's no such course. You would study physics, but I studied engineering, actually.
Okay.
But I said there was a nuclear engineering option. So my degree, in fact, my second degree, master's degree, was nuclear reactor engineering, but it includes physics, actually, of course. Now, Brian May was in the physics department and I was in the engineering department. I guess he's about 2 years older than me. I never heard of him. He obviously played in this Smile group,
right?
That I mentioned, that was so loud and so uninteresting for me. Probably a couple of the other Queen guys were in it too. There was one pulled out, I think, and Freddie Mercury wasn't in it, which made a difference.
Right.
And Freddie Mercury appeared, maybe, I don't know, 1973. When I was back there to do the master's degree, that people were telling me, hey, there's this Imperial College pop group that's doing really well. And I said, what's it called? And none of them knew.
Wow, that's so funny.
These are other roads, you know. They just didn't know. And then, to be honest, it was only when Freddie Mercury died in 1990 or 91, I think, that it was a radio interview, and Jackie Stewart, the Formula One racing driver, was interviewed, and he said, I came across these people and they sent me tickets to a concert. And I said, wow, well, I phoned them and I said, thank you very much, that's very nice. And I assumed they had some interest in motorsport, you know, fast cars, and they're pop people. And he said, so probably to Brian May or one of the others, what cars do you guys drive? And this guy said, a Volvo Estate. And Jackie Stewart said, a Volvo? But they were family men. And the other thing was, of course, they weren't typical pop people. May was astrophysics. There was another guy who did electrical engineering there. I think he's the bass guitarist. The bloke who was the drummer was a dental student.
Right.
And I don't quite know about this, but certainly Freddie Mercury wasn't in the scientific or engineering domain. He was probably an artist, or I think he maybe studied design or something like that.
Right.
So that was the Imperial College pop group, and it was only in 1991 that I realised that's who it was.
Amazing.
Because they said, Jackie Stewart said, but these guys, they drive these boring cars, and because they're practical, you know. He said, well, you know.
So did you ever meet?
No, I didn't meet him.
No. Okay.
Actually, he was 2 years ahead of me.
Right.
And actually, 1974 was when I went back to Imperial College to do this postgraduate specialization thing in nuclear reactor, whatever it was. And this is when we heard about this pop group. But I've subsequently retrace the history, and this is when Killer Queen was made,
right,
the album, and it had taken off, and Brian May said he had to give up his PhD. He was at the point of writing it up at that stage, and he had to give it up and just get on with Queen. It wasn't the time, it was not possible. But then in 2008, roughly, I got a email from Imperial College because they started to contact the alumni. You know, they started to do that seriously. I assume it's because they wanted money. They didn't get any from me though. And it said there's the annual alumni lecture, and often it's things that are not terribly interesting. But this was Brian May presenting his PhD, because it turns out that he had finished his PhD in the end, and he'd come back after Queen had sort of wound down, and he asked if he could finish it. And they said, yes, but you've got to review all the work that's done in that area in between time. And so he did that. Fortunately, there wasn't too much done because it was so esoteric as a topic that it not many other people had launched themselves upon it. And he did it, and he wrote it all up, and he got awarded the PhD. And the bloke who introduced him, who was the professor of astrophysics at this lecture, he said, and Brian holds the longest record for the time taken between first registration and final award of a PhD of 37 years.
Wow.
So this was the introduction to it. And he gave his lecture, but he warned everybody it's going to be about it's not a load of chit-chat about pop musicians and things and celebrities. It's about my PhD. So he presented it. It was very, very interesting. And then afterwards in the conversations afterwards in the question and answer, then he talked about anything, all sorts of things. Yeah, that was great. It was really nice. Would have liked to have spoken to him, but because he was such a celebrity, everybody clustered around him, particularly all the staff, all the rector of the all the sort of people that would do that. But anyway, it was fun. It was fun.
That's nice.
So that's how that spans quite a length of time, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So after graduating, you worked in France for 3 years, then in Germany. What were those years like, both professionally and culturally?
Actually, after graduating, between doing the first degree in engineering and the other one, I was in the Royal Navy as an engineer officer for 3 years, just on a short service commission. So I got to wear a nice uniform and travel around a bit, and it was kind of glamorous in a way, but it was it was a very different environment. It was quite good because it was much less. It wasn't at all the free and easy, swinging London, hippie-ish, drug-taking, dope-smoking environment that you might imagine that being a student in London. It wasn't me because I was a rower, but it was a completely different. It wasn't all laissez-faire to be a naval officer. That's what I mean.
Yes.
And so after that, I did the MSc, and then I went to work in a nuclear power plant on the far north of Scotland. It was actually a research centre which had a prototype. It's a biggish plant, prototype fast breeder reactor, which was a rather clever, they were a very advanced sort of thing, which has not really taken on. French had one, the Germans had one, Soviets still have one. But yeah, so that's what I did. And then at some point, I'd been working there for about 15 years, so I was quite old. I was 39. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being that old? They said, you need to have a job change. And they said, what would you like to do? And I said, well, if you've got anything in the south of France, I was joking, or the west coast of the United States, I'd be quite happy to go. And the guy phoned me back, the director phoned me back a week later and said, can't do anything about the United States, but I've got a job in the south of France. So I got sent to the south of France to work in a collaborative program on this sort of reactor. And the collaborating partners were basically the French, the Italians, the Germans, the Brits, and then the Belgians and the Dutch were involved in specific areas. So that was a strange change of environment. And it was... So I ended up going from the north of Scotland with the wind and the no trees, and the cold and the rain, to Provence.
Amazing.
As if I died and gone to heaven.
Right.
Don't know why I was being rewarded, but...
So those were lovely years.
That was good, yeah. No, I was there 3 or 4 years in France there. And it was very interesting. And the emphasis, the technical stuff was there, but mostly the interest was the cultural and linguistic side of it. We're working with these quite different sorts of people, particularly Italians,
Right.
I'd never met Italians before. I'd never been to Italy before. Just so different.
Yes. And of course, you speak French and German.
I didn't at the time. I did speak French. I did it at school, and I'd worked on it whilst I was in the north of Scotland because there wasn't much else to do up there in the evenings, And I'd made quite an effort with French and was quite keen, and then did a couple of special courses at the Institut Français in Edinburgh before going to France. And I was actually pretty decent and pretty fluent when I went there. But obviously, being in that environment and having to speak French most of the time really makes a big difference. So I was really keen on that. It was something to learn. It replaced rowing as an obsession.
Right. And Germany?
German, I didn't learn German at school, but at the age of about 30, there was a very good BBC, a pretty avant-garde sort of BBC course. Contactor was the first one. And there were these, it was all very, very, you could call it sexy in a way, if you like, but there were these two blokes and these two women, and they were teaching how to change a traveller's check and what to say and how to buy a railway ticket, But somehow these two glamorous women it was, and I guess there's two glamorous blokes there, but as well. But they made it very interesting, and I learnt it sort of like backwards. I could speak and say an awful lot, but I didn't have the grammar. Whereas doing French at school, it started the other way around, starting with grammar and built up. And you'd been doing it for 5 years, and you could hardly say a word.
Yes.
So it was, and then I, after this Cadarache thing, which was near Aix-en-Provence, in Provence, as I say, I went to Germany for a year. It was the same job, really, but I worked in Karlsruhe. And there I made quite an effort with German, and I was busy learning the grammar backwards and, sort of backwards, backfitting it onto what I could already say. So it started to be more grammatically correct. And somehow it's difficult talking to the Germans in ungrammatical German. You feel really ashamed of yourself. Whereas in French, people don't seem to mind, but the Germans, it's,
And then you joined the European Commission.
Yeah, after that, my job at Dunray which I was probably supposed to go back to, that became less interesting because the government decided to shut the project down. If you shut a nuclear project down, as you probably realise, you don't make everybody unemployed from one moment to the next. There's years and years of decommissioning and clean up and things. But I didn't want to do that. I'd been there when they started this reactor up, and my little team, we were busy making it work, and it was very motivating. Busy trying to find out what had gone wrong, that sort of thing. Very, very, like sort of technical, scientific, detective work. And, anyway, I didn't want to go back. To just pull something to pieces, very boring. And they said, well, we got a job in the European Commission that the British government is looking for somebody to be attached to the European Commission and Energy Department. And I think they wanted somebody inside to tell them what was going on.
Right.
They didn't really, nobody in Britain trusted the European Commission. And they wanted somebody inside.
Right.
Actually, they didn't trust the French either. I hope no French people are going to be watching this, but they trusted neither the French nor the European Commission. So they were very worried about what the French were behind the scenes, what they were setting up. Okay. And they specifically asked me to keep an eye on. There was a particular Frenchman who was my boss, who was a wonderful bloke. And later on, I told him what they'd said to me, and he just couldn't stop laughing. He said, it's ridiculous, He said, I don't have any influence. I'm not influenced by these people. I don't have any influence over them. Anyway, but this was actually quite an interesting thing. And it was rather different. Tommy, I would call it diplomatic, if you like. It's like diplomatic espionage.
Right.
But it was fun. It was fun.
Right.
So that was only 2 years in Brussels.
Right. And then you were working on nuclear safety in the former Soviet region.
Yeah, well, the reason was that the European Commission you'd already had the Berlin Wall coming down end of 89.
Right.
Everybody around here was becoming independent of Russia, the Soviet Union, and then the Soviet Union decided to shut itself down on the 25th of December, 1991. And so they had wanted to, they were worried, actually, in Europe, in the European Union, which was much smaller then, actually, than it is now. They were worried about safety standards. Not least of all because Chernobyl had happened only 5 years before. And they were very worried about it. So they were spending money to get Western experts to teach the people in Hungary, Czechoslovakia, wherever else, not Poland, East Germany. But then that was not our problem, East Germany. East Germany wasn't counted because that became part of West Germany, so to speak, and Russia, and other Soviet states, Ukraine.
So you visited Chernobyl several times.
Yes.
What stays with you from those visits?
Right. I visited Chernobyl because after the European Commission, the company that I worked for, was a state company in Britain, they wanted me back because I had a lot of inside track information about how to win contracts paid for by the European Commission. And so the job that I did for them, it sort of developed into opening offices. I opened an office in Prague and then one in Budapest. And then Chernobyl came out of it. And of course, at Chernobyl, there was a lot of cleaning up to be done. If only you were brave enough, So they were offering contracts to come up with programs to just make the reactor safe or prevent radioactive material escaping into the environment any more than it already had done, of course. And and that's why Chernobyl. So you asked what stayed with me about Chernobyl. I went there quite a few times, and I found it incredibly strange because it was so quiet. But don't forget, when I was there, they were still operating. It was Unit 4 that exploded.
Right.
And that was the newest one. And the first 3 were still operating. And they're exactly the same sort of Soviet reactor, which had inherent instabilities, inherent safety defects, you had to be hellish careful. You had to be very careful how you started them up, and what you did when you were operating. I mean, it was all right. You went up properly and then just operated at steady power and then came down again. But what they did with Unit 4 was to conduct an experiment on the way up or on the way down. I don't know. It was a crazy thing, and it was largely the communist system that dictated the urgency to do it. It was a command system. You couldn't argue.
Yeah. No.
It was not terribly democratic in that sense. No. Whereas I think in Britain, if we were asked to do something stupid, we'd say so.
Yeah.
And,
yes. Interesting.
I mean, of course, if you've seen that series on the television,
right? Yes.
That's very, very good. And really shows you the behavioural problems.
Yeah.
It also covers the technical stuff pretty accurately, in my opinion.
Yeah. Actually, I have a small personal memory connected to Chernobyl. I was in 1986. I was a secondary school student in the east of Hungary, and I had a lovely physics teacher, and he had a homemade radioactive detector. And one day he came into our class, and he was so surprised, telling us that actually it was showing a very high level. That, of course, we didn't know anything about the accident.
No, I can imagine. And of course, nobody knew about it other than the people involved,
right.
And the Soviet government, until the wind blew the radioactivity up north and it set off the alarms in a Swedish operating reactor. And they couldn't understand, and they found the radioactive level, the radioactivity was not being released from within their plant, which they assumed, because you would, wouldn't you? It was coming from outside. And actually, I think a day or so later, or maybe it's the same time, it was a weekend, because we didn't know about it either. So I worked on this plant. I was about 37, something like that at that time, so a bit older than you. And I was in a running group, and on Sunday mornings we did a 2-hour run along the coast. There's a fabulous coast up there, you know, all fallen down castles and a lighthouse, and cliffs and a beach and everything. We did a 2-hour run around this area, and it was in a very misty condition. It was very murky and misty, and we were effectively running in the Chernobyl fallout cloud, but we didn't know about it.
Wow.
So we ran for 2 hours, breathing quite healthily, you know, deep breaths, breathing probably, I don't know, cesium-137, I don't know what, and various noble gases. The good thing is, of course, about radioactivity is that the longer you leave it, the less there is of it.
Right.
So an awful lot of the short-lived nuclides that were released at Chernobyl, they'd have died or gone down to nothing. Right. They'd have decayed to nothing before the wind blew it up to us. So we just got the longer-lived ones. Right. Anyway, that's just it. But yeah, actually, the town of Slavutic, that's it's a pretty sad-looking place, you know, and we could walk in the main square because they decontaminated the ground there. Right. You were not allowed to get out the bus and walk in the grass or anything. Right. That's what they said. Yeah. On the other hand, a colleague of mine from Harwell in England, which is another atomic energy site there near Oxford, he flew out there and he took a radiation detector like your physics teacher, except it was a clever one. It was a commercially bought one which recorded. Right. And he showed me the trace of it. He switched it on basically when he was in the airport at Heathrow, flew to Kiev, and then the rest of it around the plant and everything. And the highest integrated dose he got, with cumulative dose, the highest cumulative dose that he got was in the aeroplane. Wow. Because you're up, you haven't got the protection of the Earth's atmosphere, and you've got all this radiation coming from the sun. And on the other hand, the highest absolute value was in the plant. I think he went into the control room of Unit 4. And there were places where it's much hotter than that, of course, hotter than the control room. But he went into the control room and there was a spike, but it was only very short. So the accumulated dose that he would have got was negligible. And the absolute amount was not, you know, the absolute intensity was not such that it would have done any damage. And
then Budapest?
Yeah, Budapest came in the middle of all this because they asked me to open an office here.
Right.
Yeah. I didn't do really much here because, except open the office and hire somebody to be the secretary and or to do the administration, and then look for opportunities in. The company was interested in obviously nuclear things, but it also did hazard analysis for major chemical plant hazards, you know, explosions, but whatever, you know. And you had to do. We had a methodology in Britain, after having had, of course, a number of accidents, a methodology which would reduce the probability of that happening again. Right. And so we had all this stuff, and you poor people who grew up under communism, you didn't have that. Because what I understand is that your engineers and scientists would never admit, the senior people this is, would never admit the possibility of there being an accident.
Right.
Because they just say, well, how can it be that you haven't designed it properly? So therefore, you didn't take these precautions. Well, that's another interesting aspect, cultural aspect. And that there was a demand for that sort of thing, you know, to be to teach people this sort of methodology. So that's kind of what I did around here. But my other job was Russia. And so even though I had the office here and sort of lived here, I suppose, yes, I did live here, I used to fly out to Moscow a lot. Kiev came slightly later, but we used to fly to Moscow a lot. And there I was always talking to people in the Ministry of Atomic Energy, the deputy minister, and all his, people, KGB cronies, I don't know.
Okay, and I understand you are also deeply interested in World War II history. Where does that passion come from?
It comes from the fact that nobody employs me to do this interesting work that I used to do, this sort of technical investigative stuff that I really liked. And so I just chanced upon some things related to the Second or even the First World War. I mean, you start off with your own relatives, of course.
Right.
Your curiosity in these things, researching my grandfather being taken prisoner by the Germans in 1918, and why did that all happen? And what was he doing anywhere near them,
Right.
But the most interesting thing, probably the most interesting one was sort of related to Hungary too, was that there's a really nice restaurant on the coast in Brittany where I go on holiday quite a lot, and whilst walking around after lunch, not really daring to get into the car until my alcohol level had subsided. Of course, you're aware that it's not like in Hungary where it's zero, where of course one is very careful, but there it's, I guess there's no choice, there's and so we went for a walk, and just right in front of this restaurant was a plaque saying that a German soldier called Franz Kotzur, who was 17 years old, had rescued a French civilian, Monsieur Le Pape, age 37, from drowning in the Atlantic. This man in June, it was a sunny day, and he'd gone down to the beach with a friend of his, and they thought they'd go for a bathe, but they hadn't known or noticed that the tide was starting to pull out. And when the tide goes out on the Atlantic, it's not like Lake Balaton, you've got 5-6 meters of water that's got to go out. Yeah. And they're incredible currents. And this old bloke, he was 37, was being washed out to sea, and some girls ran up to the Germans. There were 6 units of 6 Germans and a couple of machine gun positions and a little hut, it's underground, concrete thing, bunker. And they said, come and help. It was interesting because these French kids, young women, young girls, they weren't afraid of these German soldiers. And the corporal told young Franz, who was the basic level, to get his boots off and get in there and rescue this bloke. Amazing. And so this guy he had a lot of difficulty, but he must have been a really good swimmer, and he managed to get him. And the guy, the Monsieur Le Pape, was basically under the water, not breathing, and he managed to finally get hold of him and then drag him probably out of the current and then onto the beach, where he was resuscitated. His corporal rushed around with a doctor, and he came back to life. And Monsieur Le Pape, 60 years later, which takes us to 2003, he held a ceremony on that beach to celebrate his saving, the saviour. And Monsieur Le Pape by that time was 97 years old. And he tried to find young Kotzur to thank him and bring him to this thing, and also the corporal. The corporal had disappeared off to South America, actually, after the war. But they found out that Kotzur had been killed in Hungary on the way between Budapest and Vienna, the sort of retreat he was with the 6th Panzer Division as a grenadier. So young Kotzur, he was killed there. But the thing then, of course, I wasn't to know that from the plaque, which said about the rescue. Yes. But it did say, and Kotzur died before he was even 19 years old. Monsieur Le Pape, of course, lived till he was 98. And they said he's buried in military cemetery at Budapest. And I thought, I know where that place is. So next time I came here, I went there, found his grave, took photographs of it, looked in the wonderful little museum they've got there, very small. it's the museum. It seems to concentrate only on the Germans because probably they put it all together, you know. But nevertheless, and of course, there's a huge number of Hungarians there. Maybe 1/3 Hungarians, 2/3 Germans buried there. And I found more information about him. I then looked on the German internet for a German database about their war dead, found more stuff, found out where he was born. That was important. And then I looked in, I researched it, found he came from a town called Hindenburg at the time, which was before and now called Zabrze or something. And so it's completely in Poland. It's in Oberschlesien in German, Upper Silesia. And I found via, again, the German, what they call it, Bundesarchiv. I wrote to them, got all sorts of information, and found where he lived.
Fascinating story.
And then I found a very interesting website about the history of this place.
Yeah.
And there was a bloke's name there, and I wrote to him, and he said, I said, I can, I'm writing to you in English because I can't speak Polish, but if you like, I can speak German if that's better. He wrote back to me in German and said, yeah. He said, that's great. I live in Germany.
So, fascinating. Yeah.
And he, on his Facebook page, he got a huge response from that town. Does anybody know anybody related to this bloke in this particular house? The amazing thing was that the family still live in the same house as they did in 1939.
That's fascinating. And of course, just a quick word to our listeners. There's a full version of the story because David and my husband Ellen made an amazing YouTube video about Franz's story.
Yeah.
Okay, before we move to our final segment, we have a quick fire round. 15 fun questions, short answers, first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
Well, I'm not very good at this thing. I always reflect on things rather than, but never mind, we can try.
Let's try.
Yeah.
Early bird or night owl?
Between the two, actually, neither. Just the answer to that.
Okay. Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
London or Budapest for walking?
London, because I feel completely at home in London.
Right. Your favorite historical figure from World War II?
General Urquhart of the Parachute Regiment, who was involved in the Army. Well, he was in charge of.
Okay.
There we are.
Okay. A book you've reread more than once?
Applies to quite a lot of them. Certainly anything in German or French, I read it more than once because I realise that I've only understood it halfway, not completely. What have I read more than once? Probably Le Carré's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. And the reason I've read that more than once is because it's so difficult to understand it. So in Le Carré, in these early novels, these Cold War novels, it has such a deep understanding and there's such complexity and subtlety in it that you need to read. And anyway, there are other books by him and also similar things, but it's always that aspect which makes me read them again. Yeah.
Okay, next question. Rowing on a misty morning or rowing in bright sunshine?
Actually, misty morning because it's cool and you don't overheat so easily, because you can't see anything. I mean, as long as the guy steering, as long as that's not me, the guy steering can see where he's going, then I'm quite relaxed.
Good. If you could instantly master one skill, what would it be?
Italian.
Great. Your favorite place in Budapest?
Café Kör. Do you know what that is?
No.
Does it still exist? It's in Sas Utca.
Right.
Next to in front of the Basilica, there's a great big place where they have a Christmas market.
Yes.
And it's the one that goes up that way.
Okay, right. A food you could eat every day without getting bored?
To be honest, I can't imagine such a thing occurring, to be honest.
Fine.
Sorry.
That's okay. The most surprising place your career ever took you?
Siberia.
Good.
just over there. Yekaterinburg. You see Sverdlovsk, Yekaterinburg.
Right.
But it's actually the nuclear power plant town.
Right.
It's near there. I just couldn't believe I was in such a place.
Cats or dogs?
It was in the winter too.
Right.
-40. Cats or dogs? Dogs.
Your favorite decade, scientifically or culturally?
I think 1960s.
One thing people always get wrong about nuclear science.
That they think that the stuff remains at the same activity for 1,000,000 years or 1,000 years or whatever it is that they quote all the time as the one good reason why you shouldn't have nuclear power. And in fact, radioactivity is the radiation comes from decay, so it diminishes incredibly fast initially, and you don't need to keep away from it for such a huge length of time. I mean, a mere 100 years would do. But then after that, the stuff that lasts a long time is these alpha emitters, which are these heavy elements, plutonium and these sort of things, americium, those sort of things. And they're dangerous only if ingested. The radioactive, they wouldn't penetrate the skin.
Right. Okay. A song that reminds you of your London childhood.
Yeah, and it would be probably Ruby Tuesday by the Stones, because we used to go into a greasy restaurant. Restaurants can't hardly got a restaurant, cafe, and eat lots of cheap food because we were rovers and we didn't have any money. And they had a jukebox there, and that was one of the things we always played. We played Jumping Jack Flash and Ruby Tuesday, but Ruby Tuesday was my favourite. But that was sung by Mick Jagger, you know.
Right, yes. Yeah. And the final one, favorite Queen song and why?
Queen, right. There's a song called It's a Beautiful Day, which doesn't feature very often, but the reason I like it is when I'm driving, it's got almost a Doppler effect. It builds up, and then it's as though it's coming towards you and then going away, you know?
Right.
And no idea what the words are about. It's just the instrumental music that creates this effect. And steam trains, to somebody of my age, are a thing we grew up with, and all of us as children were fascinated by steam engines.
Yes.
And that sound, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm very pleased that Queen made that, actually.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great answers. Before we wrap up, we have one last tradition here on Budapest Window. It's something that connects all our guests, even the ones who never meet. We call it the message chain. So each guest leaves a short message or tip for the next person. David, this is the message waiting for you from the previous guest. So please open it and please read the message.
Okay. All right. This is obviously from a girl. Friendship is such a gift and treasure in life. May you have it in abundance always.
And nice,
My turn to write something. Yeah.
David, thank you so much for sharing your story. And it's been a true privilege to hear it. And to everyone listening, thank you for spending time with us. I hope today's conversation brought you a moment of warmth, a spark of curiosity, or simply the feeling not being alone in this big, beautiful city. We'll be back with another story, another window into Budapest. Until then, goodbye.